Hi there, welcome to chapter 2 of your human communication subject. So for chapter 2, we'll be discussing about the intrapersonal communication. Now let me recap for a bit. In our first chapter, we discussed about the meaning of human communication. We also discussed the characteristics of the human communication, and lastly, we discussed the types of communication. So this second chapter will be discussing about the first type of human communication, which is intrapersonal communication. So intra means within oneself. Let's dive into the first subtopic for this chapter. How do you define yourself? So we'll be discussing about concepts like self-esteem, self-value. Okay, so let me start with this famous quote from an American philosopher, Emerson. He said, "Wherever we go, whatever we do, the self is the sole subject we study and learn." Now, this has a lot to do with the communication, or especially human communication's characteristic to be self-reflective. What does that mean? So being self-reflective means that the communicator who sends the message is able to think within himself or herself and to react. That person is also able to judge or to evaluate the context and also able to regulate themselves in terms of how they communicate with other people. Right, since we are talking about the self, it is very good if we can understand what our self-concepts are. So what is self-concept? Now, self-concept can be defined as a set of relatively stable concepts that each of us hold about ourselves. Let me make it simpler. It's how you define yourself, how you describe yourself. In other words, it can also be considered as a mental mirror, such as, the usual mirror that we look in. We evaluate ourselves, we judge ourselves, okay, and then we determine whether the self has value or not. So where we judge ourselves to be in terms of high value or low value, that's what we call self-esteem. So just to recap, the first concept that we discuss is self-concept. Okay, it is how you define yourself, which is relatively stable. The second concept is self-esteem, how you judge yourself to be highly worthy or not. Okay, so let's delve deeper into what makes up self-concepts. Okay, so self-concept includes the concept of our emotion, our physical appearance, our likes and dislikes, such as our attitudes towards something, values, okay, and lastly, our social role in the society. Since self-concepts are relatively stable, so the concept of the emotion, okay, should be consistent. The way you see or define yourself in terms of emotions, it should be consistent. For example, you have been, in terms of personality, you are generally an extrovert. Alright, so being an extrovert, that means you tend to initiate communication with others. Okay, you're not that shy, okay, as opposed to being an introvert, whereas you may be a bit more reserved, okay, or you think more rather than say something. Yeah, so you have to consider your thoughts first. So that's in terms of emotions and perhaps personality. It's relatively stable, it's consistent. Next, physical appearance, right? what are you? Are you a female, a male, or maybe you're non-binary? Maybe you don't want to be seen as feminine or masculine, right? So that's how you can define your self-concept. So that's in terms of gender. You can define your physical appearance in so many other ways. Especially nowadays we've got Instagram, so you can filter out those, imperfections and present a more impressionable self. Who knows? Okay, I think that's what we do. Is it good or bad? Well, we'll have more time to discuss about that. Next are likes and dislikes. So this actually refers to your attitude. So what are attitudes? Attitude is an evaluation, or your evaluation, whether it's positive or negative about anything, right? So your likes and dislikes. So it's relatively stable. I'll give an example. In terms of my self-concept, I dislike smokers. Okay, I have been like this since quite young. Okay, I have a thing against smokers, but that self-concept has been slightly changed. I'm not as prejudiced as I used to be. But in terms of likes or dislike, yeah, I still dislike smokers. Right, values. Okay, so values are more embedded in your heart. Okay, values are taught since you were young. Okay, who taught you stuff when you were younger? The first is your parents. Okay, they are considered as the primary agent of socialization. So that, what does that mean? It means you communicated with your parents first, right? So the parents are the people who communicated a lot of positive, sometimes negative values, whether they realize it or not. But yeah, so values have been stuck with you since you were young, and it also extends to when you go to school. The values that has been taught by your school and also teachers and also your peers. So basically, values have been taught since you were young. That's how you constructed your values. Lastly, the social roles that you perceive yourself to be. Okay, what is your social role currently? So perhaps you're currently a student, or maybe you are a worker, okay, or you're doing a part-time job. You're also somebody's son, somebody's daughter. Okay, you're also somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend, right? So these are some of the roles that you play, okay, that you perform in the society. So this all makes up the self-concept. All right, so I have a very interesting tutorial that I would like all of you to do. Think about your self-concept. How do you define your self-concept? Now, what you can do is list down all of the self-concepts. Okay, include the factors such as emotions, physical appearances, your attitudes, your values, and also your social role. List down and describe your self-concept. I have another twist to add to this tutorial. Think about your self-concept. Is it self-made? That means you define your self-concept on your own, like nobody influenced your self-concept. Or maybe your self-concepts are actually influenced by others, such as parents, peers, the media, the way you communicate, right? So this is what I want you to do. List down your self-concept and then maybe reflect on how did you construct your self-concept. Was it self-made, or maybe it was influenced by others? Okay, give it a try. Right, so we have just discussed about self-concept. Now we're coming into our second concept for today's chapter, which is self-esteem. Right, so self-esteem has been such an issue, especially when it comes to social media. I'm sure you have been affected by the likes when you post a picture on your social media, for example Instagram. Okay, the more likes that you have, the happier you feel, or rather the higher self-esteem that you feel. So what is this self-esteem? Okay, so self-esteem can be defined as our evaluation of self-worth. Are you worth it, or are you not worth it? Okay, so it is an evaluation, it is a judgment. Okay, it's a powerful force that affects how we view ourselves, and it also affects how we communicate with others. Okay, let's look into people with high self-esteem. All right, so people with high self-esteem, they are more willing to communicate than people with low self-esteem. So perhaps maybe that's why for those who are considered to be introverts, people judge introverts to have low self-esteem. Because why? Introverts generally do not like to initiate conversations. Actually, it's such a misconception, right? There's nothing wrong with being an introvert. So it's just that introverts tend to think more, okay, and then say stuff later. But it's fine. So coming back to people with high self-esteem, all right, they tend to initiate the conversation first. Okay, they also think highly of others and they expect to be accepted by others. Okay, so they are not afraid of other people's reactions towards them. Okay, and they are also very hardworking when it comes to making an impression. Yeah, so when they are confronted with criticisms, they are more durable. Okay, they can withstand the criticisms. Why? Because they have a high sense of self-value. Okay, so what other people say about them, it's fine. Yeah, but it's not easy to do, right? Many of us still struggle with our self-esteem. Sometimes on a good day we've got high self-esteem, sometimes on a bad day, meh. Okay, you tend to judge yourself quite low, and then you also think other people are judging you quite negatively as well. Right, so to recap, people with high self-esteem, they are more willing to communicate with others. They portray a more self-confident stance, right? They're not afraid of criticism, right? But even though they're not afraid of criticism, we should not communicate, harshly. Okay, we should always strive to give constructive criticism instead. And lastly, yeah, they are comfortable in their own skin. So just now we've discussed people with high self-esteem. Now let's look into people with low self-esteem. Okay, so just check within yourselves, are you currently experiencing some of these characteristics? Okay, so people with low self-esteem, they are likely to be not just critical about their own performances, about their own self-value, but they are also critical of others. Okay, and they also expect more rejection from others. So that's the first characteristics of people with low self-esteem. They are also sensitive to criticism. Right? They perform poorly when people observe them. So this is an indicator that, okay, maybe that person is struggling with their self-esteem, and perhaps it's a little bit on the lower side of the self-esteem. Okay, they are also consistently feeling threatened. Okay, threatened by people they view as superior. So sometimes this can come off as quite hostile. Yeah, they can be quite aggressive because they feel threatened. All right, so don't be alarmed. Okay, don't be don't be affected by these kind of people. It's just that you have to understand these people are suffering from low self-esteem. That's why they are behaving this way. That's why they are communicating in such a way with you, because it's them. It's not you, it's them. Okay, they are dealing with that low self-esteem because they feel threatened by people who are perceived to be more superior than them. Okay, what to do? And they have difficulty defending themselves when viewed critically. Okay, so they will be at a loss for words, or maybe they'll just swear at you, all right, and yeah, and as an attempt to defend themselves. Okay, so it's a pity for people who have this low self-esteem, okay, because it might affect their mental health as well if this persists in a long-term basis. Yeah, so do check yourself. Once in a while we can have a fluctuation of our self-esteem. Sometimes we feel high self-esteem, sometimes we feel low. Okay, it's important for an individual to be able to bounce back, okay, and to not be stuck in either one of the condition. Okay, it's actually not that good to always have high self-esteem all the time. Okay, then you can be quite arrogant, right? And it's also very negative or very bad if you are always feeling this low self-esteem, that you can never see the value that you have within yourself. So it's not a pretty sight to be in either extreme. So let's strive to have a more balanced self-esteem. I have another fun tutorial that you can do. Okay, right. It's more of a self-reflection. Okay, but it's fun to analyze as well. Okay, think about the times in your life when you experience high self-esteem and also the low self-esteem. Think about it. For example, I'll give an example. When I was younger, I think I participated more in school as compared to in university life. Okay, and in school, I wasn't that shy. Okay, I gave everything a try, from storytelling to debates to choral speaking, to sports. Okay, blast saja. So that was an experience of high self-esteem back in my childhood years. But as we grow older, okay, I don't know, we tend to be more affected by how others perceive us, and especially with this social media phenomenon that we are currently experiencing as a postmodern society, it kind of affects our self-esteem in such a profound way. Like, we really do get affected by the amount of likes that we have on our social media. So in this tutorial, list down your highs and your lows. Okay, so highs and lows refers to the experiences of your self-esteem. All right, give it a try.